Car Battler Joe. It is the Game Boy Advance's premier vehicular combat RPG adventure game. And near as I can tell, it might be the only vehicular combat RPG adventure game out there. But that's kind of what makes it interesting. The story is, you just turned 16. Your big gift is a Super Carmobile. Except it turns out your regular Carmobile was actually a Super Carmobile all along. You just didn't know it. So instead you get a robot that powers up your Super Carmobile into becoming an even more Super Carmobile. You now aspire to become the greatest car battler in the world with your Super Super Carmobile, and you do so by driving around, running errands for people, stopping crime, and just generally making people's lives better with your car battlering skills. Let's just be honest here, the plot isn't exactly top tier. But I can distill the story down into this. It's basically the Road Warrior, but starring kids. This game is a Mode 7-tacular driving game, thus continuing to prove my theory that everything with Mode 7 is better because Mode 7. For the most part, you will be driving your car from point A to point B, generally just running errands for people, trying to find lost items on the road, defeating enemies, but at least there is a variance in the jobs, so it does try to keep it fresh a little bit. Although a lot of them do come down to just being fetch quests, or just get from point A to point B faster. Outside of the driving and basic mission structure of the gameplay, there's also sim elements though. See, when you kill certain bandits on the road, or sometimes destroy rocks, various resources will drop. Now you're limited to how many you can carry, so you kind of have to prioritize exactly what you need, but certain locations will require certain materials. Deliver these materials, and suddenly the location expands. Or if you're at a loss as to what to do with them, you could either sell them, or donate them to your own garage, so that your garage gets bigger, so you can stock different types of cars, once you find the parts to build them. I think the system itself works relatively well, but I did find one thing that was constantly annoying with this whole donating materials to build stuff sort of sim sub-element to the game. And that is, materials that have been stored in your garage cannot be given away. If you want to give something to someone, you have to then put it in your car's active cargo carrying container. Now I know that doesn't really sound all that annoying, but just picture this for a sec. You have to go into a house, talk to a person, figure out what they need, you would then have to go back, access your garage, go through your garage's inventory, and then give that part to your car, only so you could go back and then tell them you have the part and you're willing to give it to them. Likewise, while I'm complaining about menu systems here, I found it baffling that oftentimes when you're given a choice through menus, your options automatically default to no instead of yes. I know that's just a little thing, but not only does the game require you to confirm your choices, but the fact that it automatically defaults you to a negative response instead of just saying, yes, this is what I want, let's do it, means that you constantly have to be paying attention to all the sub-menus. That is just really seriously annoying. And since I'm on a roll about complaining about menu options, for whatever reason, during the story bits, you will sometimes get the option to have your character say something. I guess this was done to make your character not a completely mute protagonist, and I can respect that, except that your choices are literally the exact same response. So I don't know why they couldn't just put a dialogue box of what your character was saying. I guess it was to create some sort of illusion of choice to what you're doing, but it just felt really clunky and awkward. That said, the driving works relatively well. You hold the A button to go forward, you control with the control stick, it works fine. Going in reverse is a bit tricky because it requires you to let off the gas, then hold back on the controls, and then hit A again. It's not necessarily a bad system, it just feels clunky. Likewise, the weapons themselves work relatively well, but there is something rather awkward about them as well. See, your car can equip 3 different weapons at once. And these weapons are really cool. You get stuff like saw blades, bombs, napalm, lasers, machine guns, you name it, it's there, which is totally cool. They cover different various ranges as well as areas behind you and around you, which is really cool. But the thing is, there's no way to actively switch weapons. It's an automatic system. In order to swap weapons, your opponent has to be within a specific weapon's range. So if they're no longer within long distance range, you'll swap to your medium range weapon. Now this works decently on paper, but for whatever reason this game doesn't seem to enjoy swapping things if you're still firing. so you actually have to stop attacking in order to swap your weapons, which in turn, again, makes things feel a little bit clumsy. Now, I couldn't talk about gameplay without mentioning overdrives, which are these sort of like car superpowers you have. You can find them sometimes hidden on enemy vehicles, sometimes in the environment. When you equip one to your car, you can then activate it. It will take some of your SP and it will provide you with a superpower, like allowing your car to jump over various obstacles, or give you a barrier, or allow you to super boost. These kind of take gameplay up to the next level because suddenly not only do you have different combat and driving options with like speed ups and stuff, but you have different ways of navigating the environment. In fact, as soon as I figured out I had the jump ability, I went back to a different track, found a secret route that kind of looked suspicious, tried jumping there, and got a brand new car part for it. And that's really cool. I think the overdrives were handled expertly. But gameplay-wise, I think the car handles a little bit sluggishly, and I think that the overall weapons subsystems seem a bit too clumsily handled. But beyond that, I think the actual driving mechanics work well enough. I mean, it's fun to get from point A to point B. It's fun to shoot up your rival motorists and see what sort of materials or special equipment they might drop. And it's fun to explore all the different roads. Especially because later on they like to make the routes really big and almost maze-like, and it does feel like it rewards exploration quite handsomely. Now, it wouldn't be a car battling adventure RPG type thing without RPG elements, and they are here, sort of. You have your standard walking around villages talking to people sort of RPG stuff, but the actual walking and conversation stuff for the most part feels not wildly useful. You also have the standard RPG elements used in everything nowadays, which is levels and stats. Now, most of your stats are allotted to your parts, which you can only find lying around, which means if you want to buy a new car, you have to kind of go exploring for them and really earn your parts. But you also have a standard leveling system. This feels a little bit more awkward though, because you level as you gain more experience, which seems to only be associated with how long you've been driving on the road. But the thing about this is every time I leveled, I guess it must have just been such a minute stat increase because I really didn't notice too much of a change in gameplay or my character's overall abilities. And that kind of defeats the purpose of stat building. But like I said, the most important stuff about stats is really just associated with cars and getting the different weapons and equipment that you find lying around. If I were to summarize the overall gameplay of this game, I would say it's sort of like RC Pro-Am, but with a greater variance of weapons and car customization. The overall presentation of this game is kind of hit or miss. The basic character designs look okay, and the various environments are serviceable. I wish there was a few more different road environments than there are, but there are some real low points as well. Most of the interior locations are basically copy-pasted. And for another blow to this thing's visual presentation, the character portraits, for the most part, are just kind of awkward. But I think to balance that out, the vehicles and the various enemies and hazards look relatively good. The audio presentation is also sort of a mixed bag. All the sound effects are pretty much stock, and the soundtrack is alright. I found a couple of tracks that I kinda liked, like the town themes, as well as one or two route themes, but for the most part it just sort of was completely forgettable. And that's basically Car Battler Joe in a nutshell. It's a quirky Game Boy Advance title that is kinda interesting. It's relatively hard to find a North American copy, and from what I know about eBay, 90% of the Game Boy Advance games on there are pirated anyway and won't work. But would I recommend this game? Well, if you're into quirky driving games that kind of have RPG elements, yeah, it's not bad, provided you can find a copy that's affordable. If you don't mind playing the Japanese version, that is certainly a far more affordable option. And I think this is definitely a unique game on the Game Boy Advance that is totally worth playing. It's just unfortunate that this game seems so experimental in nature, which is why a lot of things just seem really clumsy. It sort of feels like it was laying the groundwork for a sequel, which takes everything this game did, but just makes it excellent. But near as I can tell, there never was anything close to a sequel to this game. If you like vehicle combat games and you just want to grab something really memorable for your Game Boy Advance, I'd say check this one out. It's a bit pricey, but it certainly is memorable, and it certainly is different.